Zodiac signs, solar eclipse in Virgo September 21, 2025. Part 1, a doorway between worlds. Have you ever felt like you're standing on a bridge at dusk, one foot planted on everything familiar, the other foot dangling over a brand new horizon you can't quite see yet? That's the vibe of this September. It's not just a date on the calendar, it's a threshold. And thresholds are powerful. They ask us who we've been, who we are right now, and who we're finally brave enough to become. If you've been sensing the weird mix of endings and beginnings, old routines suddenly feeling too tight, conversations that used to fit now pinching at the edges, you're not imagining it. This month compresses time. It turns the volume up on change. We're talking about a solar eclipse in Virgo on September 21st. Tucked right up against the equinox. Arriving with the unmistakable feeling that the ground under our feet is shifting. Eclipses are cosmic edits. They cut what's stale and paste in what's timely. The equinox is a balancing act, light and dark in equal measure, reminding us that the most lasting changes don't happen in chaos, they happen in rhythm. Let's make this personal. Maybe you're opening the fridge at 11 p.m. and realizing you're not actually hungry, you're restless. Maybe your calendar looks full, yet your life feels strangely empty. Maybe you're scrolling headlines about money, leadership, and health, and your body whispers, something's off. Virgo speaks the language of daily choices, the tiny hinges that swing big doors. During a Virgo eclipse, the universe doesn't just ask what you believe, it asks what you do between waking and sleeping that proves it. At the same time, many of us feel between worlds. Part of you is still loyal to habits that once kept you safe. Another part is already airborne, scouting a future that runs on clearer boundaries, cleaner fuel, and deeper honesty. That tension is not a mistake, it's guidance. When the old version of you starts to itch, it's not because you're failing, it's because you're growing. Now, zoom out with me for a moment. This isn't only about your to-do list or my astrology notes. America, as an idea, as a community, as a family of wildly different people, is also standing on that bridge. Questions of trust, leadership, health, and money are not abstractions, they show up in grocery receipts, in school board decisions, in late-night texts with the person you love. The skies are talking in archetypes, but the message lands in real life. That's where I want to meet you, where the symbolic becomes practical. So here's the promise of this series and this moment. We're going to translate the sky into steps. I'll give you the cosmic weather, but I'll also hand you a jacket. We'll talk about what Virgo at the crisis degree means for your routines, why this eclipse near the equinox amplifies change, and how to make all of that useful in a Tuesday afternoon kind of way. No doom, no fluff, just honest guidance and the courage to try something truer. Take a breath with me. Feel your feet on the floor. You don't have to have the whole plan yet. You just need one honest next step. On the other side of this bridge is a version of your life that fits better, cleaner boundaries. Calmer health, clearer purpose. The door is already open. In part 2, we'll walk through it together and unpack why this eclipse is so uniquely timed to help you change what you do, not just what you think. Part 2, why this eclipse is unique. So let's step through that doorway we opened together in part 1. If part 1 was about feeling the threshold under your feet, part 2 is about naming exactly what makes this threshold so rare, so powerful, and why it demands your attention. Here's the headline. On September 21st, 2025, we'll have a solar eclipse in Virgo at 29 degrees. Now, if you're newer to astrology, let me break that down simply. Every zodiac sign runs from 0 to 29 degrees, and that very last degree, 29, is known as the anaretic degree. Astrologers call it the crisis degree. Why? Because it's like the last few pages of a book when all the loose ends have to be tied up quickly, sometimes chaotically. Imagine you're packing up your apartment in a rush before the lease ends. You're tossing things into boxes, deciding what stays, what goes. It's tense, it's urgent, and it's meaningful. That's the vibe of an eclipse at 29 degrees. Now, eclipses themselves are not everyday events. They're cosmic wild cards, moments when the sun, the moon, and the earth line up in ways that change the script. If a regular new moon is like writing a goal on a sticky note, a solar eclipse is like carving it into stone. It sticks. It reverberates. And this one is not just any eclipse, it's happening in Virgo. The sign of daily life, health, service, and structure. It's the part of the sky that rules how you brush your teeth, how you show up to work, how you treat your body, and how you serve the world. Put all of that together, an eclipse at Virgo's crisis degree says, your habits matter more than ever. The little choices you think don't count, what you eat, how you breathe, whether you check your phone before bed, suddenly become the very levers of transformation. This eclipse is asking, what daily rhythm no longer fits? What routine needs to be upgraded so your life doesn't feel like a cage? And here's where it gets even more interesting. This eclipse isn't happening in isolation. It lands just hours away from the autumn equinox, the moment when day and night balance perfectly. That timing doubles the power. The equinox is about harmony and balance, the eclipse is about change and urgency. Together, they say, find new balance fast. Imagine the universe dimming the lights, hitting pause, and asking, are you living in a way that matches who you're becoming? Or are you still organized around who you used to be? For those of us in the United States, this is especially relevant. Think of the times in our history when the ground shifted overnight, the Great Depression, the moon landing, 9/11, the 2008 financial crisis. Each was a pivot point, not just globally, but in the fabric of daily American life, how we worked, how we trusted, how we dreamed. This eclipse carries that same quality. It doesn't just affect the sky. It trickles down to your grocery bill, your relationships, your calendar, your sense of purpose. So why is this eclipse unique? Because it's not only rare in its degree and timing, it's a mirror. It shows us the cracks in our routines, the crisis points in our systems, and at the same time offers a chance to repattern them. It says, you don't have forever to figure this out. What do you want your life to actually look like? Take a deep breath here. Because in part 3 we'll bring Pluto into the picture, the planet of power, revolution, and deep transformation. And trust me, once Pluto steps onto the stage, the story of tyranny versus freedom becomes impossible to ignore. Part 3: The Shadow of Pluto, Tyranny versus Revolution. So now that we've explored why this eclipse is so unique, sitting at the very edge of Virgo, pulsing with urgency, let's zoom out and bring in the heavyweight of transformation, Pluto. Because here's the truth, friends, an eclipse at the crisis degree is already a game changer. But when Pluto starts flexing in the background, we're not just talking about a personal shift. We're talking about history bending. Pluto is the planet of power. It rules what's hidden, what's buried, and what eventually erupts when the pressure becomes too much. Think volcano, think whistleblower, think revolution. But right now Pluto isn't just moving through its usual orbit, it's what astrologers call out of bounds. Imagine a planet stepping off the safe, predictable path and wandering into territory it hasn't explored in thousands of years. When that happens, its energy becomes extreme, and extreme Pluto means extreme power dynamics. Here's where it gets fascinating. Research done by astrologer Rosie Finn looked at Pluto's behavior across thousands of years. And a pattern emerged. When Pluto drifts north, history tilts toward tyranny, governments tighten their grip. Leaders demand more control. When Pluto drifts south, the energy swings toward rebellion, toward people rising up and demanding freedom. And as of late August 2025, Pluto is once again out of bounds to the south. Translation? We're entering a 10-year chapter where grassroots voices get louder. Systems are challenged, and the old ways of power don't hold so easily. Think about the last time you saw headlines about protests, workers' strikes, or mass movements. That energy is not random, it's part of this larger Pluto cycle. The pendulum is swinging, and while that can feel chaotic, it's also deeply hopeful, because when power shifts back to the people, new possibilities open that weren't even on the table before. Now, what does that mean for you personally? Sitting at your kitchen table in 2025? It means you may feel the same tug of war in your own life. Are you giving away too much authority to bosses, institutions, or even relationships that want control? Or are you feeling that revolutionary nudge to reclaim your voice? To say, no more, I'm steering my own ship. Pluto invites us to ask the uncomfortable questions about where power really lives in our lives. And on the national stage, here in America, this is especially charged. We are a nation built on rebellion against tyranny, but also a nation that struggles with the cycles of control and freedom repeating again and again. You can probably feel this in our politics, our economy, even in debates at the dinner table. Pluto out of bounds says those tensions aren't random noise, they're part of a larger global rhythm. So if Part 2 showed us that this eclipse forces us to confront our daily routines, Part 3 reminds us that those tiny routines exist inside a massive backdrop of shifting power. You can change your morning coffee ritual. Yes, but you're also living through a decade where the very definition of power is being rewritten. And that's why September feels so charged. We're not just talking about astrology, we're talking about revolution versus repression. Freedom versus control, both out there in the world and inside your own choices. In Part 4, we'll bring all of this back down to the rhythm of this month itself, the triple punch of 2 eclipses and the equinox, and why the timing creates a sense of energetic whiplash for all of us. Part 4, September's triple punch, 2 eclipses plus the equinox. So far, we've talked about the rare degree of this solar eclipse and the heavyweight role Pluto is playing in shifting power on a global and personal level. But here's where September 2025 really packs its punch. It's not just one event. It's a cascade. This month is delivering a cosmic 1-2-3 that almost feels like the universe wants to make sure we don't miss the message. Here's the sequence. First, we had the total lunar eclipse on September 7th. Lunar eclipses are about endings, about release. They shine a spotlight on what we've outgrown, whether it's a job, a relationship, or even an old version of ourselves. That eclipse was like the cosmic Marie Kondo moment, thank you for your service. But I don't need this anymore. If you felt unusually emotional, restless, or like you were done pretending with certain people or patterns, that was the lunar eclipse clearinghouse. 2 weeks later, on September 21st, the solar eclipse arrives. This is where the story pivots from endings to beginnings. If the lunar eclipse was about the compost pile, the solar eclipse is the fresh seed planted in that newly cleared soil. And because it's at Virgo's 29th degree, that seed carries urgency, like a sprout that's pushing through the dirt even before you've finished planting it. And then, as if that wasn't enough, we have the autumn equinox on September 22nd, just hours after the eclipse. The equinox is a balancing act, day and night, light and dark, standing equal for a brief moment. Think of it like the scales pausing before tipping again. When the equinox and an eclipse line up so closely, their energies amplify each other. One says, balance your life. The other says, change your life. Together they say, find new balance fast. No wonder many of us feel like we're walking around in a fog. Like the old map no longer works but the new map hasn't been printed yet. That's the whiplash effect of September, things ending, things beginning, and the demand for balance all at once. It's a lot, but it's also an opportunity. Because when so many doors open and close in quick succession, the room changes, the energy shifts. Suddenly possibilities that weren't even visible a month ago appear on the horizon. So how do you handle this triple punch without feeling knocked out? Here's a simple practice, between the 2 eclipses. So right now, you're in what astrologers call an eclipse corridor. It's like walking down a hallway with 2 doors. One closing behind you, one waiting ahead. In this space, clarity doesn't come from rushing. It comes from reflection. Journal a few questions. What am I finally done carrying? What patterns feel too small for who I'm becoming? What new seeds do I want to plant, even if I don't see the full harvest yet? These questions aren't just busywork. They tune you to the rhythm of what the skies are doing. The lunar eclipse cleared the field. The solar eclipse will plant the seed. The equinox will ask you to balance how you nurture it. So yes, September can feel like energetic whiplash. But if you stay present, if you trust the process, this triple punch isn't punishment, it's alignment. It's the universe nudging you to let go, to start fresh, and to live in greater balance all at once. And in Part 5, we'll zoom in on the Virgo Pisces Axis, the health wake-up call of this eclipse, and talk about how these cosmic shifts show up in your body. Your routines, and your ability to truly feel well in the midst of change. Part 5: The Virgo Pisces Axis, a health wake-up call. So, we've just walked through September's triple punch, the lunar eclipse, the solar eclipse, and the equinox. You might already be feeling the emotional intensity of all that. But here's where the story narrows in. Right into the part of your life that you carry with you every single day, your health. Your body, your routines. Because this eclipse isn't happening in just any part of the sky, it's on the Virgo Pisces axis. And that axis is all about well-being, balance, and the way you sustain yourself. Let me break it down simply. Virgo rules the day-to-day. It's your gut health, your diet, your sleep schedule, your checklists, your morning rituals. Pisces, on the other hand, rules the invisible systems that keep you alive and connected. Think blood, immunity, dreams, the lymphatic system, and even your intuition. Put together, Virgo and Pisces form the health axis. And when an eclipse lands here, especially at the crisis degree, it's like the universe ringing the loudest alarm clock it has. Wake up, something about your habits, or your health, needs attention. Now, don't hear this as doom and gloom. Think of it as a loving but firm nudge. Maybe your body's been whispering to you, through fatigue, through stress, through that unsettled stomach you keep ignoring. During this eclipse, those whispers can turn into shouts. Not because the universe wants to punish you, but because it wants to help you realign. Let's bring this down to earth. Maybe you've been running on caffeine and willpower instead of sleep and nourishment. Virgo says, pay attention to the details. Cut the corners at your own risk. Maybe you've been numbing stress with endless scrolling. And Pisces asks, isn't there a more soulful way to soothe yourself, through meditation, music, or prayer? This eclipse is asking, what habit are you ready to release? And what practice are you ready to embrace that supports your whole self? Here's a practical tip for the eclipse corridor we're in. Choose one small shift that signals to the universe you're ready for a healthier life. Just one. Swap soda for water. Add 5 minutes of breathwork before bed. Step outside barefoot for a few minutes each morning. Virgo doesn't demand grand gestures, it values consistent, meaningful steps. And Pisces reminds us that these small choices ripple out into our entire energetic field. And because Pisces rules the collective as well as the personal, this isn't just about you. It's about us. Health isn't only an individual issue, it's a cultural one. Think about how conversations around immunity, mental health, and burnout are everywhere right now. We're not just healing our own bodies, we're part of a larger wave of people waking up to the idea that wellness isn't optional. It's the foundation. So, if you've been waiting for a sign to take your health seriously, here it is, not from me, but from the sky itself. Virgo asks, what detail can you refine today? Pisces asks, what bigger dream of wholeness are you ready to embody? Together, they invite you to create not just a longer life, but a fuller one. In Part 6, we'll take this idea of wholeness beyond the personal body and zoom out again, onto the global stage. Because this eclipse isn't just rewriting your routines, it's also rewriting the way nations handle money, power, and identity, and those big shifts will absolutely ripple into your everyday life. Part 6: Global Stage, Money, Power, and Nations in Flux. In Part 5, we zoomed in close, into your body, your daily routines, the whispers of Virgo and Pisces asking you to take health seriously. Now, let's pull the lens back out. Because the truth is, none of us live in isolation. The choices we make for our own well-being exist inside much larger systems: political, financial, cultural, and this eclipse, sitting at Virgo's crisis degree, is not only poking at your personal routines, it's also shining a spotlight on the world stage. Astrology isn't just about individuals, nations and institutions have birth charts too. And this solar eclipse is slamming into some very sensitive points in the charts of major players: America, Russia, the European Union, and the currencies that knit the global economy together. Let's break it down in plain language. For the United States, the eclipse is conjunct the nation's midheaven, the point that represents public reputation, leadership, and national direction. Translation? America is staring down a new beginning, or at least a new storyline, in how it leads, how it governs, and how it shows up in the world. That doesn't have to happen on September 21st exactly. But remember, eclipses ripple for 6 months or more. The seeds planted now may sprout as political shifts, leadership changes, or cultural movements in the months ahead. For the Eurozone, the eclipse lands right on the Euro's ascendant, the symbol of identity and confidence. Imagine walking into a room and someone questioning who you are at the door. That's what this eclipse feels like for the Euro, a test of credibility, of financial stability, of identity. If you've been following the headlines about economic strains in Europe, this is not just coincidence. The sky is echoing the story. And then there's Russia, whose chart is lit up almost as directly as America's. The eclipse hits its ascendant too, the very face it shows the world. Add Pluto and Neptune hovering around sensitive points in Russia's chart, and we're looking at potential leadership shifts or identity crises. For Americans, this matters because global alliances, conflicts, and shifts in power don't just stay overseas, they influence energy prices, military budgets, even the tone of everyday news. And of course, there's the Federal Reserve, the heartbeat of the US dollar. The eclipse squares its sun, while Saturn and Neptune prepare to form a tense T-square in the coming months. That's technical astrologer language for, the dollar is under pressure. What does that mean for you? It could show up as inflation, questions about digital currencies, or new regulations that affect banking and tech systems. It's not abstract. It's your savings account, your retirement plan, your grocery bill. Now, here's the bigger theme. When eclipses hit world points like this, the issues they stir up can't stay hidden. They're thrust onto the public stage. And while financial turbulence or political shakeups can feel scary, they also open the door for reinvention. Just as you're being asked to refine your daily habits, nations are being asked to rethink how they handle power, money, and identity. So don't get lost in fear if the headlines get louder in the months ahead. See it as the same cosmic story playing out on 2 scales, your kitchen table and the world stage. The eclipse is saying, it's time to rebalance both. And in part 7, we'll shift from the charts of nations to the timeless myths of the past. Because sometimes the best way to understand what's happening now isn't through data or news, but through stories humanity has been telling for thousands of years, stories of rebellion, regeneration, and the fight for truth. Part 7 Myths that speak to now, Eris and Homerir. In part 6, we looked at the big picture, how this eclipse is rattling nations, currencies, and global identities. Heavy stuff, right? So, let's shift gears, because sometimes the best way to understand what's unfolding now isn't by drowning in financial charts or political headlines. Sometimes the clearest mirror comes from the oldest stories we've been telling as humans, myths. Let's start with Eris, the goddess of discord. In Greek mythology, Eris was famously left off the guest list for a wedding on Mount Olympus. She wasn't invited because, well, she had a reputation for stirring trouble. But what did she do? She showed up anyway, tossed a golden apple into the feast, and inscribed on it the words, "For the fairest." That one act sparked jealousy, rivalry, and ultimately the Trojan War. Now, why am I bringing up an ancient goddess at a moment like this? Because Eris is activated this month. She's squaring off with Mars, planet of action. And what does that mean for us? It means the energy of truth-telling, of refusing to stay silent when injustice is on the table, is alive and hot in the collective. Eris doesn't care about keeping the peace for peace's sake. She demands honesty, equality, and fairness. So if you've been biting your tongue about something in your personal life, or watching the news and feeling that itch of, this isn't right, you're channeling Eris. And here's the thing, Eris energy doesn't always show up as polite debates. It shows up in protest, in whistleblowing, in people who refuse to stay invisible any longer. That doesn't mean you have to march in the streets, but it might mean you finally speak your truth at work, or at home, or even in your own journal. Eris teaches us that silence can be more dangerous than disruption. Now let's bring in Homerir, a lesser-known goddess but one whose story feels eerily relevant right now. Homerir's mythology is about regeneration, renewal, and community power. In one tale, when her partner was unjustly threatened by an autocratic ruler, Homerir didn't fight alone. She called on her community, and together they stood up against tyranny. ultimately bringing down the ruler without weapons, through sheer unity and spiritual strength. Does that sound familiar? It should. Pluto out of bounds, as we discussed earlier, is already stirring revolutionary energy. And Homer's myth reminds us that lasting change doesn't happen because one hero saves the day. It happens because ordinary people link arms, pool their resources, and say, enough. Homer is also tied to themes of medicine and renewal, think stem cells. Regenerative healing, new discoveries that allow the body or society to grow fresh tissue where wounds once were. In the bigger picture, this myth is whispering, yes, there is pain, yes, systems are cracking, but there's also regeneration happening. Something new is being born out of the chaos. So why do these myths matter? Because they're not just bedtime stories from the past. They're archetypes that keep replaying in our world. Eris shows us the cost of dishonesty. Homer shows us the power of community and renewal. Together, they frame this eclipse season as more than just planetary math. It's a living story we're stepping into. And as we move into part 8, we'll turn to another critical theme of this moment, Saturn and Neptune, the dance between truth and illusion. Because once you've got Eris shaking things up and Homer urging renewal, the question becomes, how do we tell what's real, what's illusion, and where to place our trust? Part 8 Saturn, Neptune and the Crisis of Truth. In Part 7, we leaned on myth to understand where we are, Eris showing us the danger of silence. Homer reminding us of the power of renewal and community. Those stories give us language for the raw emotions of this time. But myths alone don't settle the dust. We also need to ask, what is real? What's illusion? And that's where Saturn and Neptune step onto the stage. Think of Saturn and Neptune as two very different teachers. Saturn is the strict one, you know. The teacher who insists on homework, deadlines, and hard facts. Saturn represents structure, discipline, and reality checks. Neptune, on the other hand, is the dreamer. Neptune says, imagine what's possible, blur the lines, follow the vision. Both have their gifts, but when they clash, as they are right now, we feel the tug of war between clarity and confusion. Here's the astrology in plain English. Saturn is sitting at the very last degree of Pisces, the anaretic crisis degree, and the solar eclipse is directly opposite Neptune. This is a recipe for mixed signals. News stories may contradict each other. Leaders may speak in half-truths. Even in our personal lives, we might feel like one minute we know exactly what we want, and the next minute we're second-guessing everything. It's foggy, and the fog can be unsettling. Now, I don't need to tell you that in America, this theme is everywhere right now. Fake news, AI-generated information, political spin cycles. Sometimes it feels impossible to separate fact from fiction. And it's not just out there, in the media. It shows up in our personal lives, too. Maybe you've been in a relationship where the words didn't quite match the actions. Maybe at work you're handed a polished narrative that doesn't align with what's really happening behind the scenes. That's Neptune's fog, and Saturn asks, okay, but what's solid here? What's provable? What's actually working? So how do we navigate this? The answer isn't to swing all the way to Neptune, floating in dreams, ignoring reality, or all the way to Saturn, rigid, skeptical, closed off. The magic is in holding both. Dream the dream, yes, but then test it, build it, ask, what's one real-world step I can take today that moves this vision out of fantasy and into form? Here's a practice you can try this month. When you feel overwhelmed by too much information, pause, place a hand on your heart and ask, does this bring me peace? Or does it inflame me? Your nervous system is wiser than you think. If the answer is peace, move toward it. If the answer is constant agitation, that's your sign to step back, unplug, and seek clarity within. Because Virgo, the sign of this eclipse, isn't just about routines, it's also about discernment, the ability to separate wheat from chaff. And that discernment is exactly what Saturn and Neptune are testing us on. So, if you're feeling foggy, uncertain, even a little lost right now, know that you're not failing, you're being invited to sharpen your inner compass. Truth isn't always handed to us from the outside. Sometimes, the clearest truth is the one that rises quietly inside. And that brings us naturally into Part 9, where we'll shift from confusion to creation. Because once you've tuned into your inner compass, the question becomes, how do you make real the dream? How do you take that Neptunian vision and ground it in Saturn's bricks and mortar? That's where the fun and the empowerment really begins. Part 9, Making Real the Dream, Practical Visioning. In Part 8, we sat with the tension between Saturn and Neptune, between truth and illusion, between structure and dream. It can feel overwhelming, right? Like you're standing in the fog with one foot on solid ground and the other on a cloud. But here's the gift of this moment. That very tension is what allows us to make real the dream. This phrase, make real the dream, isn't just poetic. It's the exact invitation Saturn and Neptune are handing us. Neptune says, "What do you long for? What vision lights you up?" Saturn replies, "Great, now show me the blueprint. Show me the work." When they meet, when they weave, we get the chance to move our wildest imaginings into something practical. Something lasting. And because this is happening at the Eris point, the very first degree of the Zodiac, it's like the cosmic reset button. This isn't just any dream. This is the beginning of a brand new cycle. Imagine being given clay at the dawn of time and asked, "What shape do you want to create?" That's the energy on offer right now. So how do you actually use it? Start small. Visioning doesn't mean you need a 5-year plan in perfect bullet points. It begins with clarity of heart. Ask yourself, what would I love to experience in the next 6 months? What habits, relationships, or projects would make me feel more alive? Don't worry about the how yet. That's Saturn's job. Your job, in this moment, is to let Neptune open the door to imagination. Once you've named the dream, bring Saturn into the room. Take one practical step that shows the universe you're serious. If your dream is better health, maybe that step is cooking a nourishing meal instead of grabbing takeout. If your dream is a new career, maybe it's updating your resume or reaching out to someone in the field. If your dream is deeper love, maybe it's setting one honest boundary so you can create space for real intimacy. Virgo energy reminds us, transformation doesn't happen in a flash of lightning. It happens in the small, repeated actions that stack up over time. Here's a little exercise I love. Take a piece of paper. Draw a line down the middle. On one side, write, the dream. On the other side, write, one step today. Then, fill it out. Maybe the dream is, start my own business. One step today could be, research small business loans. Dream, feel stronger in my body. One step today, go for a 20-minute walk. It's simple, but it signals to your subconscious, and to the universe, that you're ready to move. And here's the beauty. When you commit to even one step, you're not just serving yourself. Virgo always has a layer of service baked in. Ask, how does this dream also uplift others? Maybe your health journey inspires a friend. Maybe your creative project gives someone hope. Maybe your new career puts you in a position to serve your community. Saturn and Neptune together remind us that the dreams worth building are the ones that ripple outward. So as you sit in this eclipse season, don't just daydream, don't just get stuck in analysis. Either, stand at the crossroads, take the vision from Neptune, and let Saturn help you build the bridge to it, one step, one habit, one choice at a time. And in Part 10, we'll bring this whole journey to a close by talking about inner authority. Because once you've let go of the old, planted the new, faced the truth, and begun to make your dreams real, the question becomes, who's really in charge of your life? The answer might surprise you. Part 10, Stepping into Inner Authority. In Part 9, we talked about making real the dream, how Neptune invites you to imagine, and Saturn asks you to ground that vision in practical steps. It's exciting to think about planting seeds and watching them grow. But here's the bigger question. Who is tending that garden? Who holds the authority over your life? That's where this whole journey brings us, to the power of inner authority. Now, authority is a tricky word. For many of us, it calls up images of bosses, politicians, parents, or institutions telling us what we can and can't do. And yes, external authority plays a role in society. But this eclipse season is a reminder that the most important authority isn't out there. It's inside. It's your voice, your compass, your frequency. Think about how much energy we give away to outside forces. We scroll the news, and suddenly our mood tanks. We wait for a leader to make a decision, and our future feels suspended. We bend our schedules to meet other people's demands and wonder why our lives don't feel like our own. That's living from the outside in. Virgo, with her humble wisdom, and Pisces, with its spiritual vastness, both ask us to flip that script, to live from the inside out. So what does that look like in practice? It looks like pausing before reacting. It looks like asking, what's true for me, even when the world is shouting a dozen conflicting opinions. It looks like noticing when you feel that gut level wiggle, that discomfort in your body that signals something is off, and trusting it enough to make a change. Your body is wiser than you think. And here's the beautiful paradox: when you claim inner authority, you don't become selfish or cut off. Quite the opposite. The steadier you are inside, the more you can show up in service to others without losing yourself. Virgo's highest expression is service. But not martyrdom, not people-pleasing, true service. Rooted in strength. When you stand in your authority, your yes is wholehearted, and your no is clear. That clarity is a gift to everyone around you. This eclipse is also reminding us that inner authority ripples outward. Just as nations are rethinking leadership, just as currencies are being tested, you're being asked, who leads your life? If enough of us answer that question from a place of clarity and integrity, we contribute to a collective shift towards something more balanced, more humane. That's not just astrology, it's how movements are born, how societies change. So, as we close this journey through September's cosmic weather, let me leave you with 3 simple practices. 1. Meditate or breathe daily. Even 5 minutes can reset your inner compass. 2. Declutter one thing, a drawer, a habit, a thought pattern. Virgo loves order, and each release clears space for new growth. 3. Set one clear intention. Write it down. Say it out loud. Let the eclipse energy carry it forward. Remember, eclipses are felt for months after they pass. What you choose now, how you align your habits, your health, your truth, your vision, will echo into the next chapter of your life. This isn't a moment to fear. It's a moment to lean in. Step into your inner authority. Trust your own rhythm, and know that by doing so, you're not just creating a better life for yourself, you're helping weave a better future for all of us. And that, friends, is the real invitation of this Virgo solar eclipse.